Hello and welcome to We Thought About Games, the podcast where games are looked at historically, fondly, and critically. I'm your host Sid Menon, and tonight we'll be discussing Dragon's Dogma, an open-world action RPG developed and published by Capcom for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but more specifically Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, a re-released version of the game for the Xbox 360, Xbox One, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, and PC. Joining me on this episode are Bohampscious.
Hello.
Goggalor.
What's up?
And Miijhal.
Hi.
So, Bo, how'd you get into Dragon's Dogma?
Back when Dragon's Dogma was coming out some 50,000 years ago, me and Miijhal were talking about how we saw footage for the game and thought it wasn't going to be very good. And then both of us got it and we found out it was amazing. So, eventually, when Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen came out, I rebought the game and played through it, 5 times in a row. It was ridiculous.
Alright, Goggalor, how about you?
I remember when the game came out, I heard that it was pretty good, so I rented it or bought it. The important thing is I actually didn't think it was that good. I thought it was kind of whatever, but fine. And I didn't play more than the first couple hours of it. And then Dark Arisen came out, and it was we added a bunch of cool tweaks to the game. I'm like, now that that's out, I'll wait till that's cheap or whatever. I'll give that a try. And I liked Dark Arisen way more than the original version of the game, and actually played through it to completion. And they've done so on multiple occasions now.
Alright, me, how about you?
As Bo said, I originally thought it was going to be terrible, and then I started playing it, and holy crap, I love the hell out of that game. It's one of my most played games at this point. I've owned 3 copies of it. Also, I've beaten it on hard mode from level 1 on. Basically, I'm a huge sucker for that, and also my beautiful, beautiful pawn boy, He-Man.
I think all of us are a little bit of a sucker for He-Man, is the thing.
Well, I think He-Man has helped all of us greatly in our adventures on Dragon's Dogma. Alright, and for me, I can't quite remember the very first place I saw it. I think I was just keeping up with Capcom games because they were doing a lot of interesting stuff in that era. It was like Devil May Cry 4 and Lost Planet and stuff. And I didn't have a system that could play it, but I was at my brother's place when the demo for the first version came out. And when I tried it, I was pretty surprised that someone had finally taken Gothic 2, which is a PC open world action RPG, which I remember playing and thinking, I like exploring this world. I like moving around this world and being able to climb up whatever weird ledge I can so I can jump off of a cliff that's 50 feet in the air. But the combat was really bad. And I remember playing Devil May Cry and thinking, I like this a lot. I feel like this could work in a game that's not based on levels and ranks. You just put it in a world. And then Capcom made Gothic 2 plus Devil May Cry. And I was really blown away. And also the character creator, the full versions in the demo. At the time, it was the best one I'd ever seen. And even today, I think it's still one of the best. It just lets you do pretty much whatever idea you have. And that's another thing when I saw friends play MMOs and stuff, I thought, I wish I could make my character this creative in games that let you create characters. Then, in 2017, I had a podcast recording about it that went for roughly 7 hours where I tried to talk about every single thing that was in the game with a few friends of mine. You might be familiar with them.
Yeah, us.
And we died.
Yeah, pretty much. By the end of it, we were just so completely tuckered out.
It was a fun time, but then we realized this is unlistenable.
I like Dragon's Dogma a lot, and with Phantasy Star Online, there's some things about that game that I didn't mention at all in the podcast that are things I like about that game, and I guess that's always bugged me. And so, with the Dragon's Dogma one, I popped open the wiki and looked at every page, and we almost did an audiobook of the wiki, which I think is still pretty good because it means you don't have to go on the wiki.
I mean, I would prefer using the previous recording to going on the wiki. But we went through an itemized list of every single thing in the game, and like you said, it took 7 hours. And by the end of it, we were all exhausted. I think I was starting to hallucinate a little bit.
I wanted to die.
It was pretty. It was a very comprehensive, very exhaustive list of everything about Dragon's Dogma.
Yes, exhaustive and exhausting. Not only because I didn't want to edit 4 tracks of 7 hours of audio, but also after the recording finished, I thought, is this really like as personal as I want it to be? Because there's some stuff that was on the wiki that I didn't even remember, like golden and silver knights. I didn't remember those were in the game. They're pretty all right, I guess, but putting aside time to talk about them like doesn't reflect my experience at all.
They're thoroughly unimportant.
I think I only encountered them, I think, twice in the entire game, and it's like,
I fought them a lot.
They show up in Bitter Black Isle, but they show up like twice. So, we're already devoting more time this recording than we should be to talking about the gold and silver.
Exactly.
but it's like, that sort of thing. Me, Goggalor, and Sid all said, oh, we didn't encounter that much. Miijhal's like, I fought them a lot. That's the sort of variance you can expect from this sort of game.
Yep.
Before we dive into the game proper, I decided to take the development history. This game was pretty notable for bringing together a bunch of high-level talent from Capcom. Most notably is the project's director, Hideaki Itsuno, whose name I first saw in an interview when he was a co-director of Power Stone 2. He's also worked on Capcom vs. SNK, but he's most known for his work on the Devil May Cry series. He came in halfway through Devil May Cry 2 after a previous director, who has not been named, completely screwed it up, and they called him in to pick up the pieces. He did what he could with it. I think Devil May Cry 2 is an okay game. A lot of people disagree. I don't think it's great. I think it's okay. But a lot of that he was able to push forward into Devil May Cry 3, which brought the character action genre to a whole new level and created a base for other people to work from. And he also did Devil May Cry 4, which suffered in a kind of different way from a lot of HD era games by Japanese companies, where it wasn't that it was technically very terrible or anything, but they had to stretch half a game to a full game. So also on staff was the gameplay lead Kent Kinoshita, who also had a similar role on the very first Monster Hunter. It was well received, but it hadn't entirely gotten away from its influences of Phantasy Star Online yet. Kinoshita also worked on the Monster Hunter Freedom games though on PSP, and that's when the game came to its own and it just exploded in popularity, especially in Japan, but enough in America that it was a known name that stuck around.
Yeah, it's when it stopped being Phantasy Star Light and started being Monster Hunter.
And Kinoshita also worked on Monster Hunter Tri, which was a sort of refresh on the Wii, which became the basis for the Monster Hunter series up until the most recent entry where they're refreshing it once more. And that's a game that's going to come up a fair bit in our discussions because Monster Hunter and Dragon's Dogma, obviously with Kinoshita's involvement, and a bunch of other animators and musicians and staff, there are a lot of comparisons you can draw between Monster Hunter and Dragon's Dogma, and the changes they made in Monster Hunter World, the newest one, only bring them closer together.
Also, we're kind of huge dorks for Monster Hunter.
I'm going to try and restrain myself to stop this from becoming we thought about Monster Hunter.
Also on staff was scenario writer Makoto Ikehara, who was a director on a few of the Breath of Fire titles. Also was the scenario writer for the Dead Rising games. The music was, for the most part, composed by Tadayoshi Makino, who definitely gives this game a sort of ethereal quality in a lot of the tracks. There's a lot more atmospheric tracks than there are big epic ones, though due to one of the big epic tracks being the You Kill the Big Monster jingle, you will hear that one probably more often. The song most associated with Dragon's Dogma, I think, though, is only in one version of the game, and that's the song Into Free Dangan by BZ, B apostrophe Z.
By
Bees.
Yeah, BZ. Their videos get like copyright stricken so much that I can't like find an interview where anyone says that.
Good luck finding this song on YouTube. It probably is there somewhere, but it's hard to find.
You can probably find a Nightcore remix.
But Interfree is pretty great because it starts off with pianos and like slow lilting strings. It's going to be a very classic fantasy track, and then an electric guitar rips in, these drums come in, and there's these ridiculous J-rock vocals.
Yeah, in English, so it sounds kind of bad, but in like a fun way.
I listened to the Japanese version, and it's kind of the same like vocal tone and everything, but in Japanese.
And he's just playing the hype shit. It will get you pumped in any situation in which you need to be pumped.
But only if you're playing the original release.
Yep.
If you're playing Dark Arisen, you get a version of Eternal Return,
Yeah.
which is the actual main theme of Dragon's Dogma, and probably should have been on the title screen.
If you're playing the PC version, then you can fix the mistake that Capcom made.
Yeah, they didn't want to pay the licensing fee for that song again. I don't really know why, but to round out the staff, very interesting to me, they brought in Inon Zur, an Israeli composer who had worked on Fallout and Dragon Age. I expected his tracks to be like the more Western sounding ones, but they're actually kind of the more weird ones. They're associated with like the Everfall, which is an area that's tied to the weirdest plot twist in the game. And also there are vocals contributed by Aubrey Ashburn, which further lend the Western feel to the soundtrack. I think her stuff is pretty pleasing. There are some other tracks with vocals not by her that are not as good.
Coils of Light.
Namely, specifically Coils of Light, which has a child.
Coils of Light is great in that, like, I kind of do dig the English version because the singing is bad, but like that is one song where you can actually listen to the Japanese version and just be like, oh, the Japanese version has a singer who can sing, and this is actually good.
Yeah, it's like the Japanese version I think actually has like a full grown ass woman on it, so
Coils of Light uses lyrics from Eternal Return, which Aubrey Ashburn did sing for the official soundtrack. I don't know. Capcom is a mystifying company in many respects.
Yeah.
So, the Pong concept in this game was actually pitched way back in 2000, but Capcom couldn't really find a use for it, and I feel like internet speeds at the time probably wouldn't have been great for the concept anyway. But they did mix it into a concept that Itsuno had for a BBS RPG, like Bulletin Board System, the old version of the internet, a concept he had in 2008. So he began developing that one then, and in 2011 they announced at Capcom's Captivate event that it was 50% done. Itsuno described the project as his dream project, a fantasy action RPG that nailed the action elements, because a lot of other open world action RPGs at the time, I feel like people didn't even really talk about them as action RPGs because the action was very perfunctory, floaty, and not very solid. But they decided to use their expertise from the Devil May Cry series to give the combat a more solid feel. So in May of 2012, the game was released. It got an average 7 out of 10 from magazines, which is actually kind of higher than I was expecting because the game was quite janky. It didn't run great on any system it was on.
No, it didn't.
People appreciated how different it was, which is also something I was not expecting of 360 PS3 era magazine ratings in 2012.
well, it's definitely one of those games that like got sort of a lukewarm reception from reviewers, but the actual like user attach rate was way higher.
I can see that.
It was a cult game for sure. More often than not, you heard from people like, "Man, you should play Dragon's Dogma." Whereas from reviewers, you sort of heard like, "Yeah, it's really good, but maybe maybe give it a rental."
But the game was intended to be a million seller. It did hit that, which, God, it's hard to even imagine that being enough to sell a niche game. It was enough that they were able to release the Dark Arisen expanded version of the game in April of 2013. This is not an expansion, it is a new release because some of its changes are worked into the core game, among a bunch of other changes. Nowadays, I think it's more accepted that a game will be patched so much that it is as different as Dark Arisen is, but at the time it was a big ask.
There was also the problem with the limits on how large DLC could be on the Xbox 360.
Unrelated to what we were talking about, Dark Souls did come out the year before Dragon's Dogma did.
It's kind of like not entirely where the whole it's like Dark Souls thing started, but it was definitely most egregious in Dragon's Dogma.
It was kind of commonly referred to as like Dark Souls meets Monster Hunter.
which is totally wrong.
No, because that's Dark Souls. Dark Souls is Dark Souls meets Monster Hunter.
Weirdly, the one thing I can see in that is the weight of the combat in Dark Souls and Dragon's Dogma feel very similar. They both have a really good punch to them.
The main thing I feel is similar is that they're Eastern takes on a classic Western genre, but they take them in directions that are not what I feel would be what you stereotypically expect. Like, yes, Dragon's Dogma has flashier combat, but it's actually the rest of the things it does with the game that end up being really novel and have that kind of creativity that I would expect out of Capcom.
Accidentally gay marrying a clown.
Exactly.
Of course, if you really want, you can do the objectively correct thing and just intentionally gay marry the clown.
After the Dark Arisen release, there was a weird sort of heavy silence around a PC version of the game because Capcom had begun porting their games to PC and putting them on Steam, but not Dragon's Dogma, which is quite strange because Devil May Cry 4 did look nicer and run better on PC, but it ran pretty damn well on consoles already. Dragon's Dogma did not. That game creaked to life.
Oh yeah, that game, OG Dragon's Dogma, had a lot of trouble, especially when you got to the higher end skills.
They're talking about magic cannon.
Playing the certain classes, like, you knew how well you were doing based on how much the frame rate died.
So it was very strange, and I felt like it's something that was on a lot of people's minds whenever Capcom announced anything from April of 2013 through to late 2015 when they announced that they were going to release a Steam version in January of 2016. And they did. It was done by the Polish company Kulok, and it's rock solid. Great PC port.
Fantastic port.
Oh yeah.
Just absolutely solid. It hits all those PC gamer checklist things where it's like 60 frames a second, check. 4K resolutions, absolutely. All the FOV sliders you can stomach, got those in there too.
Lets you use keyboard shortcuts too, which is actually maybe the nicest feature. Also, there was a letterboxing effect in the console version of the game, so even if you were playing this game, you plugged it into an HD screen, you weren't really getting the benefit of the full resolution. This takes those away, so you can see more of the screen at a time, which, outside of looking nicer, is just better for the game.
It was especially bad because I think the UI actually overlaps the letterbox parts. So it's like, I had to wonder to myself, I was like, why on earth are they doing this?
So it doesn't explode the console, I would imagine.
From what I understand, it's a stylistic choice, and it was a bad, terrible stylistic choice.
Speaking of bad stylistic choice, make sure to go into the settings and turn off the little, event camera.
Oh yeah, the cinematic camera.
Yeah.
The action keeps going, but you can't see what you're doing because it's focused on something else to tell you, oh hey, something's happening.
No matter what version of the game you're playing, I'd recommend turning the cinematic camera off.
I'll draw its attention.
And yours, I guess.
Just that dramatic zoom in on a pond going to pick up a stick. Cool game, I really did need to know this. Glad you alerted me to it.
Now what's happening with this giant monster attacking me? I see it has killed me.
I'm dead.
And then to round out the releases of the game, in 2017, somewhat unexpectedly, there was a Good Old Games release. The online community features were sort of opt-in because you would have to use the optional community launcher that GOG has, GOG Galaxy. Otherwise, you could just play the game with no online features whatsoever.
Which is bad.
A lot of downsides, but that does make it the only truly portable, independent version of the game.
Yes. The main problem with Dragon's Dogma on GOG is that because it came out so much later than the Steam version, most of the PC player base is on Steam. And I can tell you from experience that you will maybe find a good pawn 1 out of every 20 or 30.
Pawns that are already included in the game have terrible inclinations.
Yeah, if you're playing offline, then you will never find a good pawn because they don't exist.
Yeah, Capcom had their own version if you're playing offline of the community pawn feature, which are like party members, but they're all bad, I guess, to punish you for not having good enough internet.
Well, I mean, what you can do, and what I did do in my most recent run, if you want to play offline, is you can just play only with your pawn. And then you don't have to deal with pawns with terrible inclinations, and your pawn levels up twice as fast.
The last few versions are Japan actually didn't get the PC port in 2016. I guess because a Polish company did it, so they did that afterwards, and it got its PC release in 2017. Also, the Xbox One and PS4 got console retail and digital releases that are based on sort of locked spec versions of the PC port. So 1080p, 30 FPS, I think. A lot nicer than the other console version.
It is kind of bizarre to me though that they could only manage to do it up to 30 frames on PS4. PS4 is a pretty powerful piece of hardware, and Dragon's Dogma, while it does look better on PS4, it's not the greatest looking game on PS4. I mean, this is the same system that runs Horizon Zero Dawn at 30 frames a second at all times.
I feel like if it was an issue of performance, I know Neo does this, where you could just drop it to 720p and then get 60 FPS that way. I like how the game feels at 60 frames per second more than I think the game looks a lot better at 1080p. I don't think it looks that much better since it's an old game anyway.
I suppose the really important thing about the PS4 and Xbox One versions is while they are at 30 frames a second, they never drop below 30 frames a second. Unless you're really, really causing shit to pop off.
At which point you should be glad you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're managing to drop the performance on the PS4 version, then you're probably good. I've bought this game a lot. Like, I own the PS4 version, I own the GOG version, I own the Steam version, I own the normal baseline Dragon's Dogma and Dark Arisen on PS3. That's 5 copies of the game.
Yeah, I got Dark Arisen on PS3 digitally on a sale. I think it was $7 or $11 or something. I did like it, but I'll say this as someone who does prefer, like, if I can get a game running 60 FPS and have lower graphic quality or whatever, the game isn't like unplayable on the PS3 version. Like, it still feels pretty good. It's just when you have these other options available, I don't see why you wouldn't just go for those instead.
Yeah, the PS3 version definitely did sell me on the series, so it's not bad.
Yeah, it's like the PS3 version is a good version because it allowed us to experience the game, but every other version is significantly better.
Yeah, like even a tablet or a decent laptop can run the PC version better than those console versions, so it's just easier. Okay, so I think we can. We've been talking about the game in bits and pieces here and there. We're gonna get into it. We're gonna discuss some of the story elements roughly as they come up, and we might have to circle back to a couple of them because the main story of this game,
Yeah, it's kind of plain.
it hews extremely close to what your expectations are, except it's much shorter than your expectations are. And then the sort of end game story takes a very bizarre turn.
Stick with it till the end, for sure.
It decides to turn into Mask of the Betrayer for the last hour. And it's like, oh, okay, this got good. Actually, you know what? I think Neverwinter Nights 2 is a pretty good example of what the story of Dragon's Dogma is, of, like, the main game being boring as shit. And then the, like, expansion is like, hey, you know that, like, one part of the plot that was neat? We decided to make it, like, all about that.
Yeah, that's true. The expansion actually works off the interesting part of the plot, which is weird because it's more gameplay centric.
Yeah, the expansion is Eye of the Beholder.
Yeah, it pretty much is.
The expansion, though, is not called Noun of the Noun.
I mean, you do kill the beholder before you finish that.
So, the game starts with a prologue segment. This was also available to play in the demo alongside a very short separate menu option that let you fight a bigger monster with your custom created character.
It should be noted that there were multiple demos for this game. There was like, I think 3 demos for the game, and one of them was just like, go fight a griffin. And then the first 2 demos were so bad that Capcom released the demo that most people are acquainted with, almost as an apology. It's important, though, because like this demo is probably the first time we saw a demo where it's like, here's just the first part of the game. Play this bit of the game, and if you like it, and you buy the full version of the game, you can transfer your save over.
I remember I tried the Griffin fight out in the demo first just because, well, I want to use my created character. I want to see it. I mean, it was cool to run around as my created character, but I had no context for what's going on. Like, it dumps you in the middle of what's a field area in the full game. And then you kill a couple of goblins, and before you're fully acquainted with the controls, then just a griffin busts in, and like, now you have to fight this giant thing. And the frame rate's dying, and everything's exploding, and your pawns are shouting, and the camera's jumping over them, and you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, it made the game look really bad.
Yeah. And this prologue segment is the other part that was in that demo. And it gives you a much more paced experience. You start out as a character named Savan. You're with these other troops, and apparently you've struggled to get there based on what the other troops say. You're the only ones left. And you have to take down the dragon, and you'll run into a few goblins, pretty small fry. You're probably not going to get too acquainted with the controls while you're fighting them, unless you're like me and you do the thing where you try all the button combinations you can when you start a game. But I did mention how the controls did fix an element of open world games that I wasn't too hot on, where the combat's more enhanced, and mainly they do that by having light and heavy attacks, which don't combo together really like in other games. Like, the heavy attack's just a separate move. But then when you hold down the right trigger button or shoulder button, it turns the face buttons into special skill attacks that drain a stamina gauge. And you can just do them as much as you want until you run out of stamina. There's no forcing you to combo them together. There are just situations where you might want to.
Yeah, and I mean, they start you off as like the bread and butter fighter, but it's important that they do that in the context of the game, just because, like, so the fighter has a sword and a shield by default. And they actually have separate skills. So what it introduces you to is that, you hold one trigger for your right hand, you hold one trigger for your left hand. They have separate skills. And it's like that for every class in the game except for one.
Yeah. What also is pretty smart is when you're holding down the left trigger for your shield skills, that's also your block button. If you're not doing skills, that will just block attacks regularly.
The fighter, when you're blocking, will actually actively track whichever enemy is closest to you.
Yeah, there's no lock-on for most of your attacks in this game except for specific ranged ones, but it actually sticks to what you'd want to hit pretty well. Like, I never really ran into situations where it didn't.
But yeah, I mean, like, right from the start, though, this tutorial, you got a full complement of skills to test out and try. It gives you sort of a taste of what you will get if you play a fighter early on. But it also gives you a chance to just sort of get acquainted with the controls, because you're fighting mid-tier enemies. Savan is level 20, I think. Nice and slow paced, despite the fact that there's a dragon bearing down on you, blowing fire up your butt.
The game does have, like, in-game cutscenes, like, to a really JRPG extent sometimes, where your character will do a whole bunch of stuff that's not, like, based on your input at all. After you fought a couple of goblins, you encounter harpies, which are flying enemies, and they will probably demonstrate the reason you might not want to play a fighter, because flying enemies, well, I feel like they don't purposely try to get away from melee range or like jumping in melee range. They also don't really try to stay in it. Like, they just don't care.
The downside to how they present this opening part is, like, they do give you the skill Skyward Lash, I'm pretty certain.
Yeah.
And that is the fighter's way of combating flying enemies, because it's almost a straight up, like, slash above your head.
Also, though, when I saw that name, I was thinking Devil May Cry. Oh, it's going to be like high time. I'm going to shoot up into the air and do a cool slash. Nah, there's a skill like later that does that. This is not that one.
It does have an extended hitbox. It will actually hit beyond the extent of the sword.
Yeah. The damage calculations in this game are very arcane compared to how straightforward some other stuff in this game is. But generally, with attacks that are focused on strong individual hits, not like multi-hits, it will do more damage than your regular attacks. It'll have like a bonus attached to it.
The primary thing for it is, like, you're not using that attack to deal damage to them, you're using that attack to knock them out of the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a sort of stagger mechanic in the game.
It's just that literally every other class, including warrior, has better ways of dealing with flying enemies.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. You can't just like pull a Captain America and throw your shield at it. But I guess like it wouldn't come back, so that'd probably be really bad.
That'd be kind of funny. You just throw the shield, it hits the enemy. It's like, yeah, I hit him, and then it just falls over. You have to get your fucking shield.
Kill the enemy over like a cliff edge, so it just falls into a pit. You don't have a shield anymore.
It falls into the fucking ocean, and you can never get it back.
There are items you can grab. Like I mentioned, there's some stuff reminiscent of Dead Rising. You can grab some items in the environment, like rocks or crates and stuff, and throw them. It's kind of difficult to aim, except for exploding barrels, which you don't especially have to aim. I never tried throwing stuff at enemies much. It can be pretty effective, surprisingly, but it's just really awkward. They're also throwing knives, which I thought they were just an item you could give to people as gifts, so I never tried using them as weapons.
Yeah, you can use them. It's just that it sucks to use them even a little bit.
Things like rocks and throwing daggers are basically useless.
We're talking a lot about stuff like, oh yeah, there's this thing you can do and it fucking blows. Like, trust us, it's really good, you guys.
The thing is, I'd say outside of the weakness you have against flying enemies with fighter, like I mentioned, they don't especially try to get away from you either, though, which can often lead to them trying to dive, but they're at ground level, so they just kind of stay in place. And I feel like every class is at least good to play as in most situations. And then some classes are just great to play as, which is a balance I'm much more okay with than here's the viable stuff and here's the terrible stuff you never wanted to.
Oh yeah, and like the way this game does classes, it actually actively encourages you to play different classes at like a whole bunch.
Yeah.
I will say, there are times where it just utterly sucks to play warrior.
Yeah, well, there's times that are bad to play as some classes, but they're very situational. Running around and generally doing anything you do in Dragon's Dogma is at least fine with all the character classes. Like, I wouldn't be like, oh, I can't venture out into the open world and explore as a warrior. I might not want to go into specific encounters as a warrior, but that's different.
There's specific things where you'd be like, well, maybe this wasn't the best choice.
Another thing that you'll probably notice about combat in this game too is that having party members helps a lot. Like there's some enemy status effects or attacks where you will be kind of locked down by them. Like the harpies can sing, which will put you to sleep. There are dog enemies that will grab onto you, and you have to actually like rotate the analog stick really fast to break out of it, which is again like feels very actiony in what is an open world RPG. But your teammates can break you out of that much faster if they can do it for you. Also, if your teammates grab an enemy, they will take extra damage when you attack that enemy.
It also does start you off with a pawn, and then you get two more shortly after starting the tutorial.
Yeah. Pawns have a weird role in the fiction, which will be explained later, but pretty much they are a race of people that are rather problematic because they're like a race with no willpower of their own, except to follow the Arisen, the hero. I guess the fact that no one does anything untoward with them, it's like, we'll help you on your adventure. All right, let's go on an adventure. It's like the saving grace of the pawns in terms of like the fiction and how I feel about the game.
And also, I mean, there is one notable exception in the fiction.
That's in the expansion. Oh, we mentioned the Skyward Lash ability hitting above your head. You'll actually see its other use for abilities like that in general too when you get to the end because a giant chimera jumps out. This is the big banner feature of this game, of these big monster fights, because this thing has 3 different heads with different abilities. One of the heads is also a tail. It's a snake head tail. And you can grab onto these different parts of these big monsters and climb around on them to attack different parts of them, somewhat reminiscent of Shadow of the Colossus.
It's also worth noting that in hard mode, the Chimera will one-shot you.
Basically, you fight this chimera. You get climbing around on and dealing damage to specific parts of a monster. Also, it gives you the first chance to hear the best theme in the game.
Themes around the big monster fights are pretty good. There's a few that'll show up a lot more often, but there are big monsters that have their own specific themes for fighting them.
It's actually, I think, every single large monster in the game has its own theme.
Yeah.
Or at least every family of large monsters, like chimeras and gore chimeras, have the same theme, but with the gore chimera having added electric guitar. And that's sort of like how this plays out. Is like the harder versions of monsters have electric guitar in their theme.
Mm-hmm. So after you beat this, I think it also just continues on if you die, right?
No matter what, win or lose, you get to keep going. It puts you right into character creation.
Yeah. If you kill it, though, you'll see a cutscene of this big door opening and a voice will call to Savan, and then it'll fade out. And yeah, you'll get to use the character creator, which, like I mentioned at the top, is really good in terms of options. Really wide number of body types.
Extremely extensive, and everything you do in this particular character creation setup has some sort of gameplay consequence.
You want to make your stance so weird that your arms clip into your torso? You can do that. You can do that easily by accident.
But like, there's a whole dichotomy between like tall and short, and thin and large.
Yeah, it does actually take some physical characteristics into consideration mechanically, but I would say just make who you want because they all have some advantage.
Yeah.
Like being a smaller character who can walk faster and run without using sprinting, that takes stamina, is kind of nice.
But you can only carry 2 sheets of paper before you become overburdened.
If you're going to play like a fighter or a warrior, maybe don't make yourself really small and light, because that is a pain.
That's funnier.
I mean, definitely just play what you want, because like it's not that big a deal. It will have like you will play differently depending on what your character looks like, but you can honestly get away with it if you want to play the smallest fighter or the largest mage.
It's mainly just kind of annoying having to constantly remove everything that gets in your inventory always.
Yeah, but you can fix that later on.
He's bring He-Man.
If you do want to play as a very small character, then you can just shove all the random crap you pick up onto a very large pond, so just make yourself a friend and just shove all the crap into their inventory. Once I realized you could do that, I was actually playing a huge character, but even having a small character who could just take up some of the slack on my inventory was great. There are some things that you can do with your character's like posture that don't really affect anything. Like you can make so your character's default stance is kind of hunched over. The first character I made actually looked like that, and I was like, oh, okay, is it gonna be kind of brutish and walk around? Then I picked a Strider, which is like pretty much Legolas, and you just go into this like awesome martial arts stance, and you just have a completely different look about you. I mean, that's kind of funny, but it is also, and I understand why, because it'd be really difficult to incorporate all those posture changes in. But I just say don't go in expecting that.
Yeah, can I mention that according to Dragon's Dogma, the difference between the biggest machoest super huge man and being the daintiest of ladies is how high you hold your arms up away from your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, the highest setting is just like, it looks like when Superman is putting on a show and blocking shit with his sternum.
Either you're like a pigeon-toed, hands-behind-back anime lady, or you are like Xiahou Yuan from Dynasty Warriors with your fucking arms all the way out, and like you're basically T-posing.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
Also, one of the best additions in Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen was that they added a few extra voices, including one that's extremely deep voiced and one that's extremely high pitched voice, like Alvin and the Chipmunk levels.
Yeah, I think a lot of people's joke pawns have voices like that. You can pick a voice based on just whatever attitude you like. Your main character won't say much, but it does matter for when you create your main pawn. And you can pitch the voice still. So if you have a character whose attitude or lines you like better, you can still have them be a pitch you want. And the great thing about making your character is you probably made a very cool, extremely protagonist-looking person, And then you get to the intro cutscene of the game where you're in a very peaceful, small fishing village, and everyone looks roughly like Grecian fishermen. And then your character shows up in the cutscene wearing fisherman's rags. And my first character on the PS3, I just happened to make them look like a lady version of Ganon from Zelda. So among all these like slightly tan people is a person with black skin and red tattoos, super buff and huge. Like, hey.
Yeah, my first character was a fabulous genderqueer elf. So
In this cutscene, you'll show everyone hanging out for a sec until this big dragon shows up and starts absolutely wrecking the place. And you get control for a little bit, and it tells you to fight the dragon. If you run far enough away, it'll trigger the next cutscene, but come on, play the game.
I mean, honestly, the faster way to trigger the cutscene is to run into the fire and just breathing. like it takes a second, and you just okay. So any hit from the dragon will instantly kill you, and you can do no damage. You gotta avoid getting hit so that you can hug Grigori, the best dragon.
Grigori's a good
No, he isn't. He's a prick. He just happens to be a prick in a way that is fun.
Yeah, but after you've done enough hits or you take any damage, you'll get a cutscene of your character sticking a sword into the dragon's hand. He will look vaguely amused at this, then pin your character down, and with just the tiniest flick of his finger, rip your heart out with their nail and absorb it into their mouth.
And eat it like a gummy bear.
You swallow gummy bears whole? You don't chew gummy bears?
Well, I mean, it's a very small gummy bear. You see how big the
That's
dragon
true.
is by comparison to a human heart, right? Like,
I think you'd probably get the picture that he's not eating it for sustenance.
what's that tiny candy that sucks a whole lot?
Dots?
Gigi fruits?
Yeah, juice fruits. You know how those things are like the size of your pinky nail, maybe? That's kind of how it is.
Yeah, Grigori is huge. I mean, it's not surprising when it takes no effort for him to rip your heart out. But then the dragon flies off after doing this, and your friend you were waving to earlier, she runs up to your character. And then you wake up the next day, and you hear a voice telling you, come get me. And you can pick one of 3 weapons that determines your starting class.
Or you can be like, no. and try to walk out the door 4 or 5 times, and eventually he'll be like, well, fine, idiot.
I do like the fact that Kina, or as I like to call her, Quinoa, runs up to you and tries to resuscitate you when your heart has just been ripped from your body.
In all fairness, you are alive.
Kina realizes that your breathing is the thing.
Though even so, I'll be like, oh, I know what to do next.
Just start digging a grave.
You're breathing.
No, she needs to run into the forest and nearly die, and then decide to join the church later.
And nearly die.
And nearly die again.
But yeah, you are still alive, and you are what's known in this world as an Arisen, where the dragon will rip someone's heart out, and they won't come back to life. They're not dead somehow. They stop aging, and they can command these things called pawns, which are the things that we mentioned in the prologue, the other party members. People remark on this as a thing that is known in the world, but is still very weird.
I mean, pawns are weird and incredibly dumb.
Yeah, one NPC says, oh, they just stand there and rot on the spot if they didn't get any commands.
They seem to show a little bit more autonomy than that, is the thing.
Yeah, they're too busy picking up items in the middle of combat.
Admittedly, though, you're playing the Arisen. Do you think that when you, the player, are not there, all pawns just deactivate and stop moving?
No, what they totally do is start picking things up and healing random objects.
They're not without willpower like the game describes them. They're like a bunch of people playing Little Big Planet. They want to try and figure out everything.
They seem to be very curious about humans. They do also refer to themselves differently from humans. So oh, you humans sure make a lot of expressions.
It seems all roads lead to Grand Sword.
Well, yeah, because they only built one big fucking city in this stupid, empty, expansive world. I really like Dragon's Dogma, but I am definitely the person on this podcast who has the most criticism of the base world and game of that. It's so empty and full of nothing.
I do like that they kind of made every little nook and cranny filled with items.
It's weird because I felt like when the expansion added a dungeon area that's just the most dungeon ever, that I'd be like, all right, well then clearly this is what I want. But I felt myself like weirdly missing the fields, like not because they're great, but because it's nice to have an open space. We could sum it up by saying I think we all wish that it was a nicer open space.
Yeah.
It's exactly as interesting as a field in real life.
Shit, how many undead live in Texas?
Not undead, but like you might run into another human you can talk to. Like, there's stuff that happens in real life fields.
I mean, I'm a biologist. I am very fascinated by the things that live in fields, which don't happen to live in Dragon's Dogma fields. It's mostly just grass, bandits, and wolves that asexually reproduce.
I'm about to say, I'm a game designer. They should have put a little bit more stuff in this field.
Yeah. Even as much as I like it, Itsuno himself said that they only achieved 60 to 70% of what his full vision is. So there are a lot of parts in this game where there are hints of something very big and very in-depth, but it's only done on a very functional level. There's not stuff you can run into the fields that's like a cool side activity. There's stuff you can run into the fields that you can fight, or someone who's being attacked by stuff, which you then fight.
So, vocations?
Yeah, when you picked one of those three weapons at the start, you picked a starting vocation. You can change this. Do not worry about this being a big permanent decision. Like, I guess that's why they let you leave after a while in case you're scared about it, but it's a minor investment at best.
In fact, you'll probably pick something that isn't one of these three because these three are all kind of bad.
Especially Mage, because it's basically a class for pawns, since you're just a healer with some not very good spells.
Definitely the least actiony of the three.
Yeah, the way magic works in this game, I guess we'll mention, because it's got another layer to it. Some abilities you can charge up, like with any class, but mages specifically have this meter that fills up, and it needs to fill up to allow you to do the spells. That's the investment. There's no mana in this game or anything like that. It's just charge time, and you can't move in a lot of cases, so you have to invest that. And there's a stamina cost, but that's short term as everyone else's stamina.
Some of the stamina costs are ridiculous, though, especially like Maelstrom.
Well, Maelstrom also summons in like a real ass tornado.
It's literally one of the strongest skills in the game.
It's not like a fantasy tornado where it's like, oh, it's gonna suck in this and this. Like, no, it grabs like the physics objects, sucks other stuff in. If you're inside it, you can't see anything. This game does go all in some very appreciable aspects.
I do love that it also juggles everything in it.
I sort of appreciate the fact that Dark Arisen gave vocations to the humanoid enemies that were not in the original version of the game, but I also, on the other hand, hate that one of those vocations is Sorcerer, because then they have Maelstrom to use against you.
Yes, a skill which will kill you, and then you can use the one item to bring yourself back to life.
It will kill you several times. This is actually something they straight up toned down in, like, later releases. Because, like, in the original release, if you were killed in Maelstrom, you would need to use Wakestone the second you died, or it will make you restart from and continue. That means you died because of Maelstrom. I need to use a Wakestone. I'm still in the Maelstrom, and there's no way to get out. So you need to use like 4 or 5 Wakestones, because Maelstrom lasts for like a minute for some reason. It lasts for such an unnecessarily long time. And then, like, the later versions of the game, they're like, no, Maelstrom will only kill you when you hit the ground. You might only need 2 Wakestones, because for some reason, you'll still hit the ground in the middle of it. And then just immediately get sucked back up.
That's why, with spellcasting classes, there is that buy-in time. Even like a ranged elemental attack can be pretty good because it saves you from having to do anything like carry elemental weapons or use like non-elemental ranged attacks, which might not always be effective. But with other classes, the immediacy is just so pleasing to play.
The other problem is, like mages, you just end up being a heal bot for your pawns.
And the problem with having a mage pawn try to be a heal bot for you is they will literally only be a heal bot. They will decide to never do anything that isn't heal you.
I mean, I found, like, sorcerers are actually really useful.
Because they don't get the heal ability.
Yeah, true.
You might get the impression that that's going to be the main appeal of having a magic using pawn around, because Rook, the first one appears in the story, has a healing ability, and when you take damage in combat, you'll take some permanent damage and then some red damage on your health bar, which can be healed by healing magic, and you won't have to use items to heal that. But you should get in the habit of using healing items instead. Basic healing items are just herbs, which are very lightweight, so you can carry a bunch of them.
At, like, level 200, having a mage is really nice. It barely heals you when you use little herbs.
But also you're level 200.
Yeah, level infinity, technically.
Yes.
Though Bo can speak to having a level 200 mage pawn around. How useful was Taco ever, Bo?
Not useful.
How useful was He-Man?
He-Man is marginally more useful than
Marginally
Taco.
more useful. The thing about Tato is, like, Tato would stop what he was doing at any given point to just try to heal. Whereas if it was He-Man, he would always try to do that super light, strong, fucking your life ends 30 minutes from now attack. If he hit something with it, they fucking died. He-Man is bizarre because I think He-Man secretly has all the inclinations.
We mentioned them a couple times. That's the behavior your pawns will tend towards, and it's affected by a whole bunch of factors. You can't ignore it and successfully beat this game.
Yeah, the onus is on you to beat the game.
But I have found that sorcerer pawns, if you're a sorcerer and they all have tactician, they will be extremely helpful because they will not only help you speed up your cast times by also casting the spell. There's a group casting mechanic where you can share charge times and reduce them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they still also cast that spell themselves at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a sorcerer with 3 sorcerer buddies, you can tear through things.
Additionally, I should mention that ranger pawns are actually good.
Yes.
Like, for some reason, they function correctly, whereas none of the other ones do.
They do precisely what you expect them to do at any given point, which is they will shoot.
And they're real good at it.
They have perfect accuracy.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So we talked about fighter in the intro, and we mentioned mage and like spellcaster mechanics, and I mentioned making a strider earlier, the Legolas class. That's probably the most versatile, like easiest class to start with, because you both get paired close range daggers, and instead of a shield, your L button will draw a bow. And you have skills for both of those, and you could just shoot arrows regularly too.
The good thing about the Strider is they secretly hand you the best weapon in the game from the very get-go.
Yeah, the rusted bow, if you keep upgrading it, will gain an ability to give enemies statuses that put them in slow motion.
And it works on bosses.
Yes, some bosses it does not, but far fewer than you would think for an RPG.
The ones
Yep.
you need it to work on, it totally does.
Yeah, it works on the secret final boss of the DLC. That's all you need it for. Just because otherwise Damon fucking flies all over the place and wrecks your shit.
Yeah.
The secret with Strider is that you will get Helm Splitter, and that will be all you will ever use.
There are a few dagger techniques you get. It takes a little while to get Helm Splitter, but the dagger techniques are pretty good. And actually, the fighter has this as well, where they have a skill that is a sort of rush attack. With the Strider, you can keep mashing it, and you'll do like a bunch of runs past a single enemy to hit them multiple times. Whereas with the fighter, it's a single like dashing slash attack that knocks enemies back or stuns them.
It's Stinger with knockback.
Yeah, Stinger from Devil May Cry.
It's really nice.
The problem with Strider's attacks is that a lot of the skills do very little damage outside of 100 kisses.
Yes. But 100 Kisses, which, as it sounds like, is a multi-hit. I think Scarlet Kiss is the first version, but it's a multi-hit attack. You can do that while you're mounted on the monster because you don't have your full range of moves when you're mounted on monsters, which can be kind of hilarious when you're playing as like a warrior and you got this big hulking sword, but your mounted attack is to just bash things with the pommel of the sword repeatedly.
Uh-huh.
Like you still do like damage, like not as much as a full big hit, but it still like does appreciably more damage than other mounted attacks. But it looks very silly, and you also miss out on being able to use your skills.
It makes the beholder fight hilarious. Meanwhile, like, if you're a Strider and you have Scarlet Kisses, you can do the actual coolest thing in the game, in my opinion. That fight has a gimmick where, like, the boss does this setup for an attack. It will one-hit kill you if you don't deal with it. But if you do deal with it, there's this orb, and if you hit the orb, it shoots beams at the boss and damages it a lot. So normally that's just fine because you can hit the orb and, like, you can combo off this orb and it does a lot of damage. But if you're some kind of class that you can use daggers with, you can just be like, all right, Scarlet Kisses, time to hit this orb 100,000 times.
Yep.
And you just like shoot a torrent of beams.
It rules.
And it's the coolest shit.
My favorite thing about Scarlet Kisses is the 1,000 Kisses upgrade to it on top of one of Magic Archer's abilities, Immolation, which has you set yourself on fire.
This is a weird interplay with the classes. The other bow variant classes don't learn new dagger skills, so you have to play as Strider to get those. I mean, the bows end up overtaking the daggers as the main damage dealer, but it's good to have, especially if you want to have one elemental weapon to take along with you.
When you grab onto, say, a wyvern's heart and start doing 1,000 kisses while you're on fire, they will explode. It is absolutely hilarious seeing how quickly their health bar decreases.
Mm-hmm. And on top of Fighter, Strider, and Mage, there are advanced vocations, which give you a new weapon to use and sort of focus on offense, which is why Ranger is so good for pawns because they're not good at defense anyway, or strategy, so just giving them something offensive to focus on is good. Outside of Ranger and like Mage at high levels, Warrior is not that great to play. Because Warrior gets, they're called long swords, but they're big two-handed swords.
They also get the giant hammers.
Yeah, war hammers. And Ranger gets longbows, which are just bigger. They're a different class of weapons, though, that you can't use as the other bow-using classes. And sorcerers get archistaves. Archistaves, I guess?
Arch stabs.
There's an I in there. I don't know. This game has a lot of old-timey translation choices in it. So it's not just like potion of strength or potion of magic, it's decoction of Bandily, vulgarous lord tone.
It's a lot of Shakespearean English.
The Rotunda of Dread.
Sage's Periapt.
Yeah, for being such an important item in this game. I don't actually know what Periapt refers to. I never thought to look it up. I don't know what an actual Periapt is.
I've already looked it up.
What's a Periapt?
It is an item worn as a charm or amulet.
Ah. But in this game, I guess you just smash them in your hands and consume their power because they only last for like 30 seconds.
You eat them.
Yeah. Just gonna eat some veterans' medallions.
Also, an odd note about the translation: to avoid having to make dialogue for different gendered arisens, everyone just refers to you as either the arisen or sir with an E.
Yeah, sir.
Is an antiquated term for a knight.
Yeah, it's an actual gender neutral term.
Which is pretty good, actually. I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Then there are hybrid vocations. You either have to get all the way to a grand store in the big city or go to the DLC area, which you can do a bit earlier, mostly because there's a very lengthy thing between when you can access the DLC area and the big city. The three hybrid vocations are Mystic Knight, Magic Archer, and Assassin. Mystic Knight is magic plus melee, Magic Archer is magic plus bows, and assassin is swords plus daggers plus bows plus shields.
I might get a bit of pushback on this, but these three classes are the good classes.
Oh yeah.
Like, Sorcerer's good, Ranger's good. Not as good as how hilariously good these three classes are.
Let's just all be honest here. Just quick poll. How many runs have you ended as something other than a hybrid vocation?
0.
1.
Was that like a novelty run to purposely not be a hybrid vocation?
I just wanted to try Sorcerer.
I should also point this out. Out of how many?
Good question. I don't even remember. There were so many.
Exactly.
The thing is, you usually end up as an assassin or a magic archer, and Mystic Knight is also good.
Yeah, I ended my first run as a Mystic Knight. Mystic Knight is also good.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Mystic Knight, compared to advanced and basic vocations, is hilariously broken. But the other two hybrid vocations are so much more broken that it makes Mystic Knight look pretty fair. That's a good upgrade.
Mystic Knight is the most balanced class in the game because you get it and it feels appropriately powerful for what you're doing with it. Mm-hmm. Assassin and Magic Archer are disgustingly overpowered.
Yeah, for Magic Archer, which is my main and favorite class. For one, you have Ninefold Bolt, which does so much damage, it's just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, I mentioned attacks having lock-on. Magic Archer's attacks are like having multiple different brands of lock-on laser.
You also get Ricochet Arrow, which will stun lock enemies in the right areas and also basically just completely tear through their health.
Mm-hmm. Magic Archer is like, you know what you need in this fantasy RPG? You need the QAAMs from Ace Combat.
Also, Magic Archer gets a dagger skill that has a very interesting property of basically being a parry apt, which buffs your damage a ton.
Yeah, can you cast it multiple times too?
You can cast it up to 4 times.
Yeah, Magic Rebalancer is good.
It's just really, really ridiculous. But like, Assassin gets a skill, it's called Gouge, and it upgrades all the way to the skill, I think it's Dire Gouge.
It's Dire Gouge, but then if you put on the Bitter Black item, it's Deadly Gouge.
And Deadly Gouge might as well just be called take a couple of health bars off every time I use this, because like...
For Assassin, Gouge is a mounted only attack, but hey, the strongest enemies are generally things you can grab onto anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you grab onto them, and then you hammer the button that you map Gouge to, and you watch as you I say slowly, but I actually mean very rapidly win the fight.
The first time I decided to fight a dragon enemy, you encounter one in the main game before the end game, and it was very intimidating, and I was very weak at that time, so when I tried the Dark Arisen areas, there are some places where you can encounter dragons earlier, and I just ran for it because I was still kind of nervous about them. Then I decided to try my luck at one, and I was playing an assassin, and I think I had done Gouge enough on other enemies to get Deadly Gouge, and I got to the weak point, the heart, and I mashed it, and I killed the dragon. And then I just got absolutely, like, absurdly fearless, and there's, like, an arena, and you can carry a certain item into it that will summon stronger enemies, and one of those arrangements has 2 lesser dragons in it, and I'm just like, I'm invincible now, I have the power of God, and I just jumped in there, and guess what, I won. So...
Okay, so also a thing Assassin can do, and I guess this is also a thing that Strider can technically do, but Assassin can do it better. You can get explosive arrows, and you can combine them with a parry that increases your attack power. So you can have a pawn, say a He-Man shaped pawn, carry around like 450 explosive arrows and a whole bunch of Conqueror's parry apps. You can get real strong real quick, and then you can just watch the game die and whatever you're attacking just disintegrate.
5-fold flurry and 10-fold flurry with explosive arrows.
10-fold flurry is hilarious with explosive arrows.
Most other games try to sort of limit your ability, like, as a fan of explosive arrows is just like concept and like weapon to use in games. they try to limit you a lot. I think you can only carry like 5 exploding crossbow bolts with you tops in Dark Souls 3. Dark Arisen, if you're willing to deal with the weight, you can fire multiple flurries of 10 exploding arrows at once. Extremely like it's not slow at all. Like I mentioned their charge moves, you don't charge this one.
It's super fast. It's almost like semi-automatic, like where you just fucking you can do it as fast as you press the button.
One fun little note about Magic Archer. They have two particular skills, one of which Assassin also gets, Instant Reset, which basically lets you stop any animation you're currently doing.
It is a fighting game cancel in an action RPG.
But unlike fighting games, it includes being knocked down.
If you're knocked down, you can just use Instant Reset and you are instantly standing up, no animation between. But combining that with another skill, Sunflare, you kind of hop while on fire and then burrow your dagger into the ground with an explosion. But if you jump, use Sunflare, and then use Instant Reset, you can do Sunflare again and have the longest and highest jump in the entire game, and it is really satisfying.
I've realized something which I would like to make a clarification here. You may, listener, be wondering, we're talking up all these classes, these hybrid vocations, and how good they are, and you may remember back to when we were talking about pawns are always bad unless they're like a ranger. You might be thinking, well, if these are so good for players, how do they fare as pawns? Well, the answer is, I think they realized how broken this shit was, because pawns aren't allowed to play hybrid vocations. They just don't get them. So you will never see a pawn who is a magic archer, an assassin, or a mystic knight.
Can you imagine a full party of assassins or fucking magic archers?
Didn't one of you crash the game as a Mystic Knight with all the abilities?
I did. I nearly melted my PS3 by using it. Okay, so there's a skill that Mystic Knights get called Drake Cannon, and in the original release of Dragon's Dogma, there was also a skill, and you can still get this skill in Dark Arisen, but it's different. There's a skill called Ruinous Sigil. The setup is Drake Cannon, whenever it takes damage from any source in the original Dragon's Dogma, it will fire off like 5 bolts of magic energy, which on their own don't do a whole lot of damage. But you can get an augmentation that makes your skills last longer. You use that, so you put down 2 Great Cannons, and then you put down a Ruinous Sigil, and you watch as the frame rate dies.
Because what Ruinous Sigil does is it damages everything in the area that it is.
I think they might have patched that.
Yeah, they patched it so it will not damage the magic cannons.
Yeah, they specifically changed it to it only damages enemies.
But of course, you have other options to still fire a ridiculous amount.
You want to know what your other option is? You hit it with your mace.
Yes, there are also skills that the Magic Knight has that do multiple hits.
No joke, just personal experience. In original OG Dragon's Dogma, I was in like the last part of the game, and I had this setup where I could cast stuff really fast. So I managed to get 3 Great Cannons out before I put down Ruinous Sigil. And when I did that, I put down Ruinous Sigil, and like I heard a bunch of noises from it blowing everything up, and then the game hard locked, and my PS3 crashed, and I had to reset it.
That's great.
And I'm like, well, I guess I win Dragon's Dogma.
But yeah, the other gimmick that Mystic Knight has is a skill called Dark Anguish. Every attack you do does an extra hit every time, and there are some attacks that do tons of extra hits, and together you can tear through things hell.
Okay, so like the thing that makes the vocation system great is that pretty much at any point you can go talk to an NPC and change your vocation. And this is how you really like stat yourself out.
Yeah.
Every class has different different stat growths. Like if you want more HP, then you change over to warrior for a little bit and you get a whole bunch of HP. Or like if you want a whole bunch of stamina, you switch over to strider, or like I do, and I start as a strider, and you have a ton of stamina. Yeah, and you could do that at any point, and you could basically not ever really fuck yourself out of being good.
Unless you do something like play Sorcerer for the entire game and then want to be an assassin.
That's not so bad, even, because like if you're level infinity, then the game's difficulty is pretty much over.
True, on hard mode it's a little worse, but basically you won't be as strong as you could be, but that's still playable.
This is not a game where optimization really comes into play, even in hard mode.
Yeah. I actually didn't know that was a feature when I played the game, but there's still reasons to switch between various classes because you'll gain abilities called augments, and you can slot a limited number of these into your character. But they are sort of abilities relating to that class, which will either further enhance that class's ability or allow you to pass that enhancement on when you play as a different vocation.
Like, honestly, augments are the big reason to switch classes for me, anyway. Like, the ability to hold more shit and move at a faster weight class.
And around the time you get to play with it for a little bit, you may be thinking to yourself, well, what if I did make my character look kind of weird? Well, you did a second chance at it because you get to make your own pawn.
Also, you get infinite second chances because you can just completely redesign how your character looks. Aside from gender, I think is the one thing you can't change.
No, you can change gender.
The item is like a complete redo of your character.
Oh yeah, that. I was just thinking of the barber shop. But you're right, there is that item that will completely let you remake.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I went to the barber shop and like I figured they wouldn't let me change this because it's a physical aspect of my character. Because they let you change a lot of stuff. You change skin color, hair, whatever.
Plastic surgeon.
Yeah, pretty much. But I wanted to. I picked one of the faces that has one eye like shut by default because I knew there was an eye patch in the game. The thing is, there are variants of the shut eye for the left eye and the right eye, and I picked the wrong one for the one eye patch in the game.
So they're just blind.
Yeah, so I spent a shitload of money so that I could have the eye patch go on the actual shut eye.
Also, it's worth noting at the barbershop you can get new hair colors and skin colors. It's a very neat little touch, and also it means you can get pink hair.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting choice of, like, during character gen, you just have standard human hues of hair, basically. But then at the barbershop, you'd be like, nah, give me pink hair.
Why wouldn't you want pink hair?
Give me the bright green Joker hair.
But making your main pawn, it's good that you get to play for a little bit so you kind of get a sense for probably how the other vocations work because you can pick the one your main pawn starts with. This character will be with you the whole time, and I mentioned the inclinations changing. This is affected kind of by your behavior, so if you pick up a lot of items in combat, they'll start doing it, etc., etc. You can sit them down in a chair in some locations and like inns and talk about their behavior with them.
Okay, so like one of the first questions you're almost guaranteed to get asked when you sit them down in a knowledge chair
Is how much they should talk.
The way they phrase it is like, I try to speak up or remain quiet depending on the situation. Is this good for you? And the options are yes or no. And if you say no, then they kind of just shut up. But if you say yes, they're like, all right, well then I'll try and be a little bit more talkative.
Yes, and you should always choose that because pawn chatter is incredible.
It is the first time you hear it.
It is every time you hear it.
Yeah, that is the one thing I definitely disagree. Well, there's a few things, but like the main thing I definitely disagree with people on this podcast about is I think pawn chatter sucks and I hate it.
I turned mine down, I'm not gonna lie.
I think you suck and I hate you.
I love my pawn talking. I want to hear every stupid thing He-Man has to say.
Well,
about
you will.
everything.
You'll hear all the stupid things I have to say.
Well, He-Man just happens to be entranced by the size of this one particularly large tree.
I like that there's an area where you are going to rescue a witch, which you have already met before, and He-Man spouted out something akin to, rumor has it a witch lives in this wood. Well, no shit, you've already met her.
Also, hey, ranged attacks.
There's no emotion to it, it's just if they were teaching you a lesson in, like, an English class or something.
The voice actor is just like reading, like, it says ranged attacks, right? Ranged attacks?
Yes, that's basically what it is.
Pawns are great, and pawns also suck.
Yeah. Your main pawn, you can hand them equipment freely and also items. The pawn mechanic plays out further, though, when you go to a Rift Stone, which in the prologue you did this, but it automatically gave you two specific pawns. You can visit these, and it will connect to the network. You'll be in a void area, and other pawns will walk in. And this can be just your friends list, it can be other players, and they're sort of set to be in the neighborhood of your level if they're just random ones. If they're much higher level, you'll have to pay this special currency called Rift Crystals to hire them, and it increases the more higher level they are than you.
Unless
they're on your friends list, in which case you can hire them for free.
Yep. You can be level 1 and have He-Man for free.
Welcome to the Rift, where you can see any number of anime waifus that people have created.
And also get rid of Rook.
Yeah, or you can just throw him into a pond, it'll be fine.
Well, see, he'll come back, is the
yeah.
thing. Because, like, he's not to be present for that cutscene. He'll just... Like, it's kind of hilarious because you can decide to not do that quest, and every time you enter a new area, he'll just be, like, dead on the ground behind you. But, like... Yeah, you start off with this pawn called Rook, and, like, he's a level 5 mage, and for the time you have him, he's okay. Like, he'll cast fire on stuff occasionally. But, like, as soon as you get the option to start summoning pawns, ditch him.
Yeah, the thing is, the game doesn't really indicate to you that you can go ahead and get rid of him because he's been in a couple of story cutscenes, but he's actually not important at all.
The thing we haven't really mentioned about the way the pawn system works is the only pawn that levels up is your pawn. All hired pawns will never level up, which means that Rook, who joins you before it is possible for you to get into combat in the game, is the lowest possible level pawn you will ever encounter. So he sucks compared to literally anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you want to get rid of him because he can't level.
Also, something about his stupid face pisses me off.
Oh yeah, his facial looks terrible and his haircut.
If you're lucky, you can hire Rook's son, like I did, who's just somebody made Rook but short.
That's the fucking greatest. But also, like, can we talk about... Okay, so Rook is voiced by Keith Silverstein, at least until a cutscene, and then he's not voiced by Keith Silverstein.
It's pretty good. Also, like, you don't have to do anything for this function to be available. Your pawn will also appear in other people's rifts. And if they hire the pawn, then the more time they spend with them, they will acquire rift crystals over time, and that's how you would get them. And outside of hiring pawns, there are some things you can buy with rift crystals, and there's a mechanic in the Dark Arisen expansion that you use to get items using it. This is pretty much the extent of the online interaction in the game. There's not like multiplayer in a traditional sense. I guess that's another reason why it reminded people of Dark Souls, is that has more traditional multiplayer, but it was still a weird implementation for the time.
One of the things worth noting is that pawns also learn while you have them around, and while other people are hiring your pawn will learn about quests or monsters and either give you hints or just know what to do better in combat.
With their explanation of not having much willpower, they're the perfect encapsulation of, you knew all the time, why didn't you tell me? Well, you didn't ask. Like, literally, they wouldn't tell you if you didn't ask.
At this point, though, like, since you've got your pawn and everything, you can really, like, go do stuff now. But the problem is there's not a whole lot of stuff to do. So, like, this incredibly heavily accented woman named Sir Mercedes will tell you, like, hey, you should rest here at this encampment. You get woke up by the worst alarm clock in the history of alarm clocks.
You have to fight a big hydra that rips in the encampment. A very interesting fight. Also interesting in the fact that they don't let you do it again for a very, very long time. But it is a cool encounter, because it has 3 different heads, and they'll have like various attacks that you expect, but they'll also do one that's a bite that you can resist by moving the analog stick, but it's easier to have a pawn break you out of it.
Quote unquote easier to have a pawn break you out of it because it requires a pawn to do a thing.
Pretty much, if you don't have a specific augmentation and he gets you with that bite, you are pretty dead.
It's happened to me.
you just save yourself the carpal tunnel syndrome by just reloading the game from that point.
But yeah, as soon as you do enough damage to any of the heads, and there's also exploding barrels to help augment your damage here.
Wait, shit, there are?
Yeah, what you're honestly supposed to do, the way you are supposed to engage with this fight, is pick up one of the explosive barrels, throw it at the Hydra. The Hydra will eat the explosive barrel, and then you shoot it in the lump in its neck, and it will blow the head off, and you win instantly.
Fuck.
That's the way you're supposed to deal with this fight.
I never knew that.
It took me a long time to learn how to do that, and I never had a chance to actually succeed at doing that.
It's kind of hard to make it work.
You would think with me being Monster Hunter, man, I would have tried that.
Yeah, as soon as you knock one of the heads off, though, Mercedes will show up again and say that this would be a good prize to show to the Duke. And also everyone's surprised at how strong you are, which is weird because, like, there are bandits you can run into earlier who are way stronger than you are. They can kill you in 1 to 2 hits, and you'll do barely any damage to them. I mentioned the damage calculations are arcane. They are also very stringent. You can do no damage to enemies if you're not strong enough. It's not a percentage for armor. It is a wall you need to break through.
Yeah, if you're too low level, you're just fucked.
You are going to be too low level for those bandits. They are absurd.
There's a quest you can do immediately after leaving the encampment after doing this Hydra fight. And it's like, Tina's gone missing. We need to go find her. You have to go to the Witchwood, but on the way to the Witchwood, there is a metric ton of bandits.
You can fight some of them, but you can't tell which ones are stronger and which ones are weaker.
Do they have a shield? Fucking run away.
Yeah, if they're fighter bandits with a shield, get out of there because they will stun lock you to death and murder you.
They have like 100,000 health, and you will not be able to deal any damage to them at all.
If you don't go towards the very obvious woods and you head down towards the broken down castle, that's the bandit stronghold, and there's like a ton of them on the way.
Admittedly, if you do bypass the bandits, the actual Witchwood is not as hard as the bandits.
Yeah, the Witchwood is actually very easy. It's filled mostly with wolves and spiders. Spiders die in like 1 hit.
The one bad thing will be is if you go at night, there's ghosts, and the ghosts are horrible all the time.
And by the time you finish fighting these fucking impossible bandits, it will be nighttime.
Yeah, there's a day and night cycle in this game as well, and night is very notable in Dragon's Dogma for being pitch black. It is actually impossible to see in the dead of night without a lantern.
Mm-hmm.
Dragon's Dogma, even on PS3, had a phenomenal lighting system, and like one of the first things it tells you to do in the game back in the tutorial is like, here's how you open your menu and put on a lantern.
Yeah, like I think the graphics in the game are not too outstanding, and art style wise, in a lot of ways, it's not that inspired. There's also not like a lot of great sunrise views. There are a couple, but I feel like sunrise is just so relieving that like you will remember a sunrise because you will never forget the night that came before it.
Genuinely, I think Dragon's Dogma handles like nighttime and the darkness of it probably better than any other game I've played. It's really tense and atmospheric. God, it's kind of creepy, especially if you're low level and you know there's a chance you'll stumble on something that'll kick your ass, and you can't see it until you run into it.
I remember fighting wolves at nighttime because they're pretty threatening by day, for sure, but at night, even with a lantern, they can do like these pretty lengthy side hops and stuff, and they will just disappear from you. They'll just vanish. You'll try to turn around, they won't be there. Because even if the enemies aren't super intelligent, they are smart enough for the way the game works and for how your instincts will go if you just try to rush after them the first time, that they can pull some stuff on you.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty freaking. You'll be fighting wolves and you'll like kill one, and then you'll hear howling in the distance, and more will come. And there are like alpha wolves in the packs, like mixed in, but there's not just one. There's multiple. So you'll be fighting a small wolf, and then you'll turn, and there'll be a bigger one, and then you're suddenly in way more trouble than you thought. And then a skeleton lord rises out of the ground.
Yep. I have grown to really hate those wolves just because they summon other wolves, and it's not like that there are other wolves in the area that get the attention. A wolf makes a howl, and other wolves just teleport in to maul you.
One might say, wolves hunting bats.
Oh, I've heard that 1,000 times. Thank you, He-Man.
The whole thing this game is setting you up to do at this point is to go to the main city, Dran Soren. We're talking a lot about day and night cycles. The walk to Dran Soren while you're escorting this Hydra head that you have to take with you is long enough that you will either see sunset or sunrise.
It's almost there to force you to experience that because there are people who like to play extremely cautiously, and there are items that let you kind of do this more easily later, but who will just not set out at night. Now, I'll just pass the time. Why not? You just sleep in your bed for free, whatever. You can't do that during this segment. And if you set out at night, you will additionally have to contend with the undead.
Also in hard mode, if you're doing that quest at low levels, it basically exists for you to get killed by the cow that's escorting the cart because you accidentally kicked it and it ran into you, because that is a one-hit kill no matter what.
Yeah, we've mentioned hard mode a couple of times. It was added in DLC to the original games, but it's just packaged with Dark Arisen and the newer releases of the game. By hard mode, they just mean we boosted the attack and defensive enemies a lot, but also the golden experience rewards.
It's pretty obviously meant for New Game Plus purposes, but you can play it at any time.
I love the game too much to not do that.
Yeah, the funny thing about the arc of this game, because we mentioned hitting like a defense wall for enemies and not being able to do enough damage to hurt them, with hard you will hit that wall very early, but then you will level up so quick and you will get money to buy better equipment because equipment are the big boosts in your attack power in this game. You will get those so much faster that actually the sort of mid to late game will get much easier for you.
Really gets ridiculously hard at the end game is Bitter Black.
Bitter Black Isle is a special case, but we'll get to that.
Yep.
Also mentioned equipment increasing your stats. It's not really a build choice in this game. Like, this is pretty much just a bunch of straight upgrades, and then maybe you want an elemental variant of the weapon for certain enemies. The only thing that would keep me from upgrading to a newer weapon is a lot of weapons in this game are extremely ugly.
You don't like the titular dragon's Dogma? A sword with wings on it?
A sword that looks like you got it from a fucking hot
It
topic.
looks like a longsword variant of Soul Edge, is what it looks like.
It looks like you walked into a party city and you're like, give me the shittiest, edgiest sword.
And, there's those designs, but then there's ones like some of the ones you can buy from the Black Cat are actually kind of interesting design. Like, oh, this is strong against griffins, and it looks like a griffin wing. Then there's ones like Wounded Fury, which is like, this is just a bunch of orange hard angles, a bunch of pointy hard angles in like a semicircle.
How many people use those weapons, though? Because they suck ass.
They're good in specific situations.
They have, like, no good stats.
The ones that people use are the ones that increase ability point gains.
Yeah, there's one that when pawns die, they're knocked out for a bit, and you can run up to them and just lay a hand on them, and they'll get them back up. And if you take too long, they'll go back to the rift. There is a staff, though, that they'll automatically revive on their own if they have it.
The one that I have ever gotten use out of is Sir Mercedes armor, because it's better than the only other suit of clothes that you can wear to pretend that you're a lady. Because that's a thing that you have to do at one point in this game, is if you're playing as dudes, you have to get past ladies who will kill dudes on sight.
Misandry bandits.
So you either have to put on a full dress, or you get Mercedes armor and you have tit plate.
Or you can just do like I do and just go around.
Technically you can go around, I guess, but like, they are right in the way.
Or you can kill them. I would like to make friends with them, but you can kill them.
Or you could be their trans girlfriend. I just give them so many scolds. They all like me. Because Misandry bandits are great.
But yeah, basically though, like armor is the thing you're more likely to keep lower tiers of, just because like you might want to go for a certain look.
Armor, I think, looks good in this game.
Yeah.
For the most part.
There is a blacksmith in Grand Soren that will upgrade your equipment. You can do this at a few other people, but like you're going to be using this guy the most. Say you have a piece of armor that you want to keep wearing. You want it to have better stats. You can upgrade your armor by giving him monster parts or just various items. Some armors and stuff get different effects the more you rank them up.
Yeah.
So a lower level piece of armor might be something you wear the entire game. For example, the leather cape you get from the guy just outside Castardis when you leave for the first time is a really, really good cape.
Yeah, it lowers your stamina consumption.
It's really good defense and upgrades based on, like, wolf parts. Legitimately, I didn't get better capes until Bitter Black Isle purifying, like, Bitter Black level 3 capes.
But yeah, like the whole thing about the armor system is like you don't just have like chest piece and pants. You can wear a helmet, a cape, inner armor, an outer armor, a pair of gloves. You can wear an inner and outer pair of pants.
Yeah, there's a clothing layer and an armor layer.
Also accessories. The baleful nails. That's going to take up one of your slots.
Yeah, you're going to use the baleful nails, which is they give you 10 strength and 10 magic, which is absurd.
Yeah, you put on really good... Like, your fingernail game is on point, and it makes you punch people better.
Yeah, you get really visual K, and that gives you both inner and outer strength.
I think my favorite accessories in the game are the ones you get for rift crystals that do nothing.
Those are the gold rings and platinum. I think that's just so you can launder rift crystals into money.
Yeah.
There is some equipment, I think it's actually weapons though, that are like gold, which are on the base just sold for a lot of money. But if you max them out, they can actually silence magic enemies.
Mm-hmm.
But rings that say like, oh, it doesn't seem to have an effect, they're junk. If it says it doesn't seem to have an effect, it doesn't have an effect. This game's not trying to trick you.
I'm not even talking about the gold and silvers.
Yeah, you're talking about the premium ring.
Yes, the premium rings that have, like, different colors. If they do anything, I have never noticed.
They do absolutely nothing. They're there to just be like, I am obscenely wealthy. I need something to spend it on.
I think some pieces of accessory, if you stand stock still, you can see a little blinking color effect by your hand sometimes.
Yeah.
So, like, another thing that you can do with pawns is whenever you send them back with a gift. If you have found a pawn that is exceptionally shitty, you can give them fate stuff by forging it at the Black Cat.
Yeah, after you do the head escorting thing, then you're allowed to mess around in Grand Soren for a bit before you do any like main quest stuff, and like you can explore the whole city. You can head back out on the field and go to some other areas. There's not a whole lot more places you will gain explicit access to at this point in the game. Mostly it's a function of whether you can survive getting there.
Or whether the door is locked.
Yes. But yeah, the Black Cat is the sort of black market shop. This is where they sell some like unique items that used to be DLC, so they're weapons with bad stats but a specific gimmick. And apparently some of them can apparently be pretty good based on what I've read. This thing's very good against ogres or something. If it is at its full potential strength, then using it against an ogre will be better than using a very good weapon of the same class. But the thing is, like, the weapon that's good against griffins is a bow. So if you're not a bow using class, you just can't use it. So it's super specific as to when you'd use these. But yeah, forging. So you can make fake copies of items. Sort of, sometimes they're not fake.
If it's a material, it will not be fake. If it's something that has a special property, it will be fake.
Yeah, and this goes all the way from fairy stones, which are the like fast travel items. Like if those are fake, then your character will throw it up in the air and they'll just fall back down on their head.
Here's a fake wake stone. Try to use this. Oh no, you're dead still.
But if you get a material, like in some cases too, the way it's done for certain super rare enemies is to get one copy of their material, like, oh, this white giant saurian lizard man tail. Oh, they always show up in like one or two rooms. Okay, I'm just gonna get one. I'm gonna take it to the Black Cat, and he is going to somehow, out of money, fashion whole cloth an actual another tail that you can use in crafting.
Uh-huh. Here's a fraction of Damon's horn. The ultimate evil. Give me 2 or 3 more of these. 250,000 gold sounds good.
That function is pretty great. Though I actually didn't know you could do that also in my first run through the game for actual materials. In my case, I actually just didn't bother grinding materials out.
I normally got most of what I needed just kind of playing normally.
Yeah, enemies drop a bunch of materials, and like the way the encumbrance system works in the game is it'll go up in like specific tiers on like a percentage of how much you can possibly carry. It's only really a problem when you get to like heavy and very heavy.
So yeah, you can forge plot or quest items that they want you to fetch and turn them in place of the actual item, so you get to keep it. And there are actually like story effects for doing this.
It's very interesting to see what the interactions are.
There's one where a guy wants you to fetch a tome that carries a powerful fire spell. And if you give him a forgery in another quest, he'll come to help you against a griffin, and the spell won't work. It's kind of hilarious how he responds.
At first, he's like, "Oh God, I guess I did it wrong." But then, if you go back to town and meet him, it's like, "Yeah, I consulted with someone, and I'm never gonna trust the Arisen again."
And I mean, don't trust the Arisen. If you're like me as the Arisen, I will probably kick you into a pit or launch you sky high with explosive arrows. So,
I mean, the most amusing one, though, for sure, is Duke Edmund Dragon's Bane's crappy ring that he needs you to go find. That all he uses it for is to open a chest in his treasury. But, like, what it actually does is, like, make you cast spells faster, which sure is useful for him, a warrior. Fucking dumbass. I hate Duke Edmund Dragon's Bane. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's funny. The game makes a big to-do out of doing all these quests so you can finally have an audience with the Duke. He sucks. I hate him.
yeah, the Duke sucks.